standing for the Chair of Middlesbrough Council, Councillor Steve Landell.
Please be seated. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's meeting of Middlesbrough Council. First item on the agenda, apologies for absence. Do we have any?
We do, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Branson, McIntyre, Sharrocks and Young.
Okay, can we note those? And Councillor McTighe. Okay. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any? Okay. Minutes of the council meeting held on the 24th of January and 7th of March. Move them as accurate. Can we agree? Thank you.
There was a recorded vote of 28 votes to 8 at the meeting. The minutes have been corrected since then because we've received an email from the monitoring officer saying a mistake was made. But really, the minutes should be amended at this meeting and not before then. Is that okay, Chair?
Yeah, that's fine. We'll amend those minutes as mentioned there. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 4, announcements, communications. There are none for this meeting. Agenda item 5, petition Chandler's Ridge School relating to a Section 106 agreement. Is Mika Smiles here? Okay, I'll invite you, Mika, to present your petition to Councillor Brunton Dobson. And if you wish, you have up to 2 minutes just to introduce your petition to the members here today and say 1 or 2 words about it. Okay.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm obviously here to present the petition. Basically, what it's about is in 2012, developer Grey Towers Village agreed to pay Middlesbrough Council an education contribution of £750,000 for the provision of educational services and infrastructure at Chandler's Ridge Academy. 5 years later, the council is now exploring making changes to this agreement so that the money can be spent on schools across the whole of Middlesbrough. The petition is obviously to demonstrate the feeling of strength against that. The school already struggles with maintaining and improving the infrastructure for children already on the roll, and this is because the school receives one of the lowest amounts of funding per child in the whole of Middlesbrough, as Nunthorpe is an area of relative low deprivation. The school planned to use the funding for outdoor play facilities, a bigger nursery, and improved classroom facilities for all. My 2 children actually attend this school, and my little boy's classroom doesn't even have a window because it's in a corridor, so that is why the council originally sort of looked at the situation and agreed that Chandler's Ridge did in fact need this money. So I thought I would bring a couple of the comments that I've had when sort of getting the signatures for this petition. Somebody said, "This is an absolute disgrace. I now have 2 children attending Chandler's Ridge, and Middlesbrough Council should not be allowed to do this." Somebody else said, "I knew this would happen." Another said, "Disgusting. I'm happy to sign and share the petition. This school is so short on space, they should get the funds that they were promised." The comments, I could go on and on with them. So hopefully the petition demonstrates how upset people are in the local community about this issue.
Thank you very much, Mika. And the petition will be reviewed. You okay with that, Councillor Brunton Dobson? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 6, Mayor's statement and report. Mayor Budd.
Yes, it is, thank you. Right, we've got a huge agenda tonight, so I'll try to be fairly brief, but I've got four items I'd like to to talk about, one of which won't be very brief, because, and you'll probably realise why as I get to it. So the first thing I'd like to say, although the weather's improved, if you recall just a few weeks ago, we had two spells of really quite appalling weather. And I think we can all agree to this, which is unusual. I'd just like to thank all of our staff for all of the effort that they put into keeping people of Middlesbrough safe. And beyond that, I'd like to thank many, many people in Middlesbrough who just did kind things, just thoughtful things. Again, hopefully we can all agree that. The second thing, which will take a little bit longer to talk about, is the antisocial behaviour and criminal activity in East Middlesbrough, which I think has been highlighted in the press over the last few weeks. It focuses in Berwick Hills, Pallister, parts of Park End, Bellevue, and particularly around Norfolk Shops. Just to assure you that many things are being done to address this. I've got a whole list of things that the police are doing, which, as you probably realise, I don't want to go into in any great detail, but they've arrested nearly 20 people so far, as they put it. So there's further police action continuing in many, many different ways, using different parts of the law to try to improve the situation for everybody. I think one thing that it has done, it's brought all sorts of people together. The local councillors, the council, business owners, the landlord, and the police are working together in a number of different ways to try to come to some satisfactory conclusions. The police are keeping residents informed through social media, and I think you'll find that in the Gazette tomorrow, presumably in the printed version, there'll be quite a long article which will include part of that, which is quite useful. It gets it home to even more people. So the sort of thing that the council is doing in conjunction with the police is joint home visits, which I think probably everybody's come across in the way that they work, antisocial behaviour warnings, acceptable behaviour contracts. We've actually installed a CCTV system which covers the whole of the Norfolk shopping precinct. And then we move into preventative work, which is, all right, it sometimes has an immediate impact, but it's also a long-term impact, which I think everybody knows is needed. So ward councillors across East Middlesbrough have been involved in this. They may want to comment about how that's worked. I think there's been a communication system as well through local councillors to my office, to the chief executive and various parts of the council and the police to try to keep people updated with what's going on and how people are working together jointly. Councillor Mick Thompson, who has an executive responsibility as well as being a local councillor in that area, has met with representatives of the shops in Norfolk Place. One thing that I think is quite remarkable and really quite pleasing, the schools have been involved. The UCA in particular has had a meeting with local councillors. I think Councillor McGee is co-chair of a group that's been set up from that. And tomorrow morning, students from UCA are going to hand out community safety leaflets at Norfolk Shops, which I think is a really good initiative from them. Community Council has also been involved, in Middlesbrough Environment City, which again has a different influence with perhaps different groups of people in different ways, is also involved. Police school liaison officers are working in local schools as well. Youth outreach work continues. And there's a joint action plan being developed. And the JAG, the Joint Action Group, will monitor that, and there's a task and finish group specifically to address the problems that have been seen around Norfolk Shops. So there's a whole range of things going on in response to what has been a difficult situation for the last few weeks. So really just to assure you that all of these agencies are working together, and it's only by working together that we can come to some long-term solutions rather than the possibility of just moving things around. So that's the item I wanted to say most about, and I hope you can realise why. Just two more things. One about awards. As you may know, Middlesbrough Council was highly commended for driving growth, our investment plan, at the Local Government Chronicle Awards. This is yet another acknowledgement of our investment plans and how they're seen outside of this place. And I'm also very pleased that we were named one of the top 10 small cities in Europe. a strange phrase, some might think. A small city being anything up to 1.5 million people. I hope that some people who are occasionally negative can actually recognise that it's very good to be recognised as one of the top 10 cities in Europe. The negative attitude from some people just seems all pervasive sometimes, but I think the outside world knows how well we're doing, and this is yet another acknowledgement of it. Finally, yesterday we handed the keys back to our town hall from the contractors, Kia, although there'll still be some work going on for the next few weeks. The transformation is amazing. I think everybody here will have a chance to have a look around before it's open to the public. It really is well worth having a look, and I think we can be really proud of the work that's been done. There are little bits and pieces still to do, but I think the main thing we should all concentrate on now is making sure that it's used, not just in the way that it was used before, but in many new ways to use the new areas that are now opened up. If you just look up in the courtroom, away from the graffiti which has still deliberately been left there, if you look up from the courtroom, the ceiling which has been hidden for decades is quite astounding. So I hope everybody gets the chance to go and have a look around. That's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Budd. Any questions, comments? Councillor Dryden.
Of the police, which have been immediate and proportionate. And what we've seen there it's beyond antisocial behaviour, it is criminality, and the full force of the criminal law should be brought to bear, and we applaud that. We've been corresponding with the police at all levels, from the PCSO to the Chief Constable, so they're fully focused in ensuring that the people who want to bring a culture of fear and intimidation in the area will not succeed. I also welcome the multi-agency approach and the all-systems approach, because this isn't something that just turned up a couple of weeks ago. As the councillors know, it's been festering. There are issues. There's things we've been doing as councillors through the JAG, trying to get resources into places like Pallister Park, create diversionary activities and positive activities, and hopefully we'll continue to do that after this current outbreak of stupidity has elapsed, and we'll continue to work with the agencies of the council and put back some of the things that have been taken out over the last 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McGee.
Just to reiterate the points that have been made by Mayor Budd, and just to say how clear it is that although we've faced some very significant issues over the last few weeks, I just would like to reaffirm that there are some fantastic young people who are working on some great projects within Unity City Academy, and I'm very pleased to be associated with those projects myself. Personally, I went to see young women present their feelings, how they're growing in confidence on a project called Fearless Futures, and I think that's a good term for this area that we are working in. They then had the confidence to come and speak at International Women's Day festivities, and I was very, very proud of them that they came and they spoke and we were able to work with them. That work will continue. These are great people in a good community. We are facing issues. This is a good place to live, and by working together, we'll overcome these difficulties and we'll be proud of some very good outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, yep.
And the issue is about Berwick Hills and Pallister. The work we've been doing with the police and with the conversations we've had, this isn't about Berwick Hills and Pallister. And young people who've been intercepted come from all areas of Middlesbrough, from Martin, from Nunthorpe, from Grove Hill, from Linthorpe. So this is a Middlesbrough issue, and it's something we have got to tackle collectively. That's just a point I'd like to make.
Any further questions, comments for the Mayor? Okay, moving on. Agenda item 7, Deputy Mayor and Executive Member reports. Now, we have over 22 questions for the executive members today. Now, because the size of the agenda and the likelihood of pressures on time, we have 30 minutes for these questions. So I'm going to ask that anybody asking a question is precise and straight to the point and doesn't sort of go into a great speech. And I'd also ask that when executive members are answering the question, if at all possible, unless there's a great amount of detail required, that they give fairly concise answers as well. I'm also, in line with the Constitution, only going to allow people to, if a number of people have requested more than one question, I'm only going to allow them to ask the first question until we've been through everybody, to give everybody a fair chance of getting their question in. It may mean that we might have to jump about, but I'd like to think you'll bear with me on that, just so everybody gets a fair chance to ask a question. Mr. Roberts is going to time it for us, so once the 30 minutes is up, that will be it. So first set of questions are for Councillor Rooney, and first question is from Councillor Lewis. Middlehaven Snow Centre, step forward. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a comment, really. It's regarding the Middlehaven Snow Centre, page 3 of the Deputy Mayor's Executive Report. I'd like to commend Councillor Rooney and officers for their excellent work. The Snow Centre is said to be catalytic in respect of the regeneration and transformation of Middlesbrough and the wider Tees Valley area. It is anticipated there will be at least 350 jobs in the Snow Centre, and the scheme will trigger further investments in the Middlehaven area. The Snow Centre project is a key part of the Council's investment prospectus, providing a bold vision for creating jobs and attracting investment in Middlesbrough. I am particularly pleased that this is a Middlesbrough Labour Council-led project being delivered by the Labour Mayor, Dave Budd, and continuing the transformation of our city centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rooney.
Thank you, Chair. In line with your earlier remarks, I'll thank you for those remarks, and I agree with everything you said. It is a great boost for our city centre. These architects don't come cheap, and I do understand they need paying up front, so it's a private sector initiative helped and facilitated by us. It's great for the city.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, the next two questions are also for Councillor Rooney, but they're on the same topic, so I'll invite the two members to ask the question, and Councillor Rooney can just give a single response to both of them. So the first question on Centre Square is Councillor Chris Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Rooney, in your report, item number 5, Centre Square, third paragraph, it states that the Council's commitment to buildings 1 and 2 will prove that there is sufficient demand for high-quality office space in Middlesbrough to enable the development of future phases. How can Middlesbrough Council, taking over these 2 buildings, prove that there is any demand for office space? Surely, if there was demand, we would not need to take over these 2 offices in the first place. And what happened to the firms that we were told at the planning meeting were wanting to move into these offices and bring 1,500 jobs? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The second question on this Centre Square topic, this time Councillor McCabe. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to ask the Councillor, how much is this rental over the period of time going to cost Middlesbrough Council?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rooney, do you want to respond to those 2 questions?
Thank you, Chair. I admit to being slightly puzzled by the second question, but I'll give it a go. Once again, we're entertained by the Coalition's question on this. We started off with Father Ted and down with this sort of thing. We've moved on to Frankie Howard and up Pompeii. With apologies to our younger viewers, nay, nay, and thrice nay. That's all the same.
Right,
excuse me, Chair.
Yep. Can I remind everybody, as I tend to have to do quite a lot lately, this is a council meeting that members of the public are allowed to attend. So please, can you keep an orderly fashion and respect when an elected member is on the feet and making a statement, answering a question or asking a question, that we give them the best of order, please. Councillor Rooney.
It was made very clear in the report to Executive when we made the decision that the 2 buildings leased by us, one would be used by us, the other one would bring us a profit in on current predictions. We're actually negotiating with people who want to come to that second building, and that rental level is 10% up on the original level we started with, on which we would make a profit. So there is profit to be had there. It also said in the report that private investors won't invest in the North East. It isn't just Middlesbrough, they will not. We are giving them the confidence by taking the lease on these 2 buildings to come into Middlesbrough, and we already have people interested in more floor space than we're building there now. We're not guaranteeing that, but we do have ambitions and hope. And again, the spokesperson for the coalition went on from the call-in onto the radio in local press to say, mention the Field of Dreams. He was sharing his coalition colleagues' skit on that. If we build it, they will come. And he said there'd be 5 white elephants. Well, we're only taking 2 buildings, so I don't know what he's talking about. I did think that the white elephant was someone else entirely. And again, he said in the press, I agree with the scheme in principle, or I don't disagree with it in principle, if I ever get the words right, and I'll continue to oppose it. Now he wants to stand on both things. Now, as for the Field of Dreams, I quite like documentaries. So your stance is obviously, if we don't build it... Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I ask, please, I can hear a number of voices coming from the members of the public. Can I ask you again, please to be quiet when the council meeting is in progress and people are conducting business. Thank you. Next question is from Councillor Hubbard. Sorry, I missed this one. This was laid out slightly different. So it is from Councillor Hubbard, and it's the Snow Centre. I do apologise. There's already been one question being asked on that, Councillor Hubbard. If I'd have picked up on it, I'd have let you both answer the questions at the same time. But Councillor Hubbard.
Thanks, Chair. Could Councillor Rooney inform the Council as to what due diligence has been undertaken on the company coal runnings? Thank you.
Councillor Rooney.
Well, Chair, normal due diligence will be taken on a project of this size. It's a £30 million investment in Middlesbrough. They're a Middlesbrough company. We have helped them facilitate it, as I said earlier.
Thank you. Final question for Councillor Rooney is from Councillor Walkington on the Railway Master Plan. Councillor Walkington.
Seen the designs will know that it's very impressive. My question for the executive member is about the funding of the scheme and what plans have we got to secure the financing to deliver this project?
Councillor Rooney.
We're already partly delivering the project as the work can be seen going on. The south entrance should be open soon. We've worked with Network Rail and the other people who run the station because it's quite complicated. There's various industries that work in the station. Some own the rail track, some own the trains, some own the passenger services. So it has been difficult. We've enlisted the help of our MP to try and push this forward because it is our rail station and we will be seeking further investment in it. I notice there's been some press about the Combined Authority, and the Combined Authority gave us some of our own money, essentially. The leaders of the Combined Authority, not one person, and again, I think there's been some misinformation in the press about what that money will do. The money will do what it says in the report, that the future money, and there's some nice photos of what the station could look like if we get the investment for the third platform there, when we and that will come after we get the direct service to London. Other services are also being improved, so we're seeking funding from all parties involved in this, and we do hope to go forward to make this a city centre rail station fit for our city centre.
Thank you, Councillor. Next set of questions for Councillor Rostron. Next question, and it's from Councillor Mohan, out of hours inspections of food businesses. Councillor Mohan.
Chair, a question was submitted by myself in advance on the list regarding the Snow Centre.
There's obviously been a mistake, Councillor. I do have 2 questions for you from you. One for looked after children and one for revenue budget and investment programme. I don't have anything submitted for you on the Snow Centre.
It was submitted.
Given that there's been 2 questions already on the Snow Centre, Councillor, and we may run out of time, Are you sure you want to take that? Because that would mean your other two questions would go right to the bottom of the queue.
I am, Chair. This is vital for the Tory Labour coalition that Charlie Rooney's so proud of.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm not going into dialogue here. We're just checking whether the questions come in.
Apologies, Chair. Do Julie's then, if maybe we'll come back to this.
Okay, Councillor, we are struggling to find this question, if it has been submitted or not. We'll move on. If it is found, I will come back to you and give you the opportunity to ask your question. So moving on, Councillor Rostron, Councillor Mohan would like to ask you a question. Councillor Mohan.
Thanks, Chair. Can I ask how many food premises have been closed due to enforcement activity in the last year? Page 7 out of hours inspections of food businesses. How many food premises have been closed due to enforcement activity in the last year?
I can't give you an exact number off the top of my head, but I'll certainly get a number out to you. If I can just say we try not to close premises unless there is a real public health issue. As I've said in my report, we send regularly, we send 2 inspectors out to each of our premises, and we have 1,200 premises of food businesses in Middlesbrough. We actually inspect 600 a year, approximately. I mean, I can't give you exact figures. And when we do send an inspector, quite often, if we know there are issues, there'll be a licence officer with them, or a police officer, or an immigration officer. But I think what the good news is that of all those premises, 92% of them are in the 3, 4, 5 hygiene standard, and 82% of that 94% are in the top national standards. So we do have a good record, and say we only close premises if there is a real public health issue, but we will work with them to try and get them up to standard, and I will get back to you with a figure.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, I do apologise for that, Councillor Rathmel. Your question has been found. It wasn't on the list, but So I now invite you to ask your question on the Snow Centre.
Thank you. This one's for Councillor Rooney. As you rightly said, that you've helped facilitate the Snow Centre with a grant of £94,500, which was joined up with your Tory colleagues of £235,000. I'm just wondering if you could tell us, has the capital build financing of around £30 million been secured yet? Or is it anywhere near on the dormant company?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rooney.
It wasn't my money. It was our money. The same applies to the Combined Authority, by the way. It's the Combined Authority money, and it's good for you to point out that we've put more in than they have. As for the 30 million, that's up to the private company, but we said in the report they've already engaged really expensive architects who I mentioned need paying up front. They are on the way to starting the Snow Centre this year, but it is a private enterprise. I'm not privy to their private financial arrangements.
No, I'm sorry. I mentioned at the beginning we've got 20-odd questions to be asked. I'm allowing people only to speak once, one question. I'm not allowing supplementaries. Sorry about that. I am allowed to make that decision whether to allow supplementaries or not. It's my discretion. Paragraph 1.
Paragraph 1. Because the asking of questions on page 60 doesn't limit any member to
Councillor, the rule that's just been read out for you is basically saying that the chair of the council runs the meeting, and I can make any decision at my discretion. So because of time pressures on tonight's meeting, I've made a decision that there will only be a 30-minute section, and no supplementaries will be allowed. Right. Councillor Carr, the next set of questions are 4, and the first question is from Councillor Saunders, Assessment and Care Plan.
Thank you, Chair. The position is that nationally it is anticipated that a caseload would be about 20 per social worker. In some, because we have a very high proportion of newly qualified social workers, they are only entitled, they are not allowed to have a caseload of more than 15, and that does mean that in some instances other social workers have caseloads in excess of 20. So there is a wide range, ranging from 15 from those who are in the newly qualified year up to, on occasion, something in the mid-20s. But generally speaking, we're aiming for 20. But I think it is the case, and it is not evenly distributed, but there are some teams or some individuals with caseloads in the high 20s.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question, Councillor Walters. I believe it says successful funding music. Councillor Walters. Councillor Walters, do you wish to ask a question? Yeah.
It's out of the executive member report, Michael. I was really, really pleased to see the report on funding of the MuSync project. Because I'm a music lover and because music plays and can play a critical role in the intellectual and academic development of children. So the earlier we start with this kind of project, the better. And the wider we can associate our children, the better. I hope that this project is sustainable. And I want to ask how far we can anticipate that. And if it suggests a revitalisation of the very, very valuable and incredibly highly thought of Tees Valley Music Services that many of us in here will have enjoyed. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
I'm grateful for the question and for you illustrating the fact that we've been given significant funding to support this really exciting project. And for me, importantly, music can sometimes be seen as an elitist pursuit. And as somebody who sometimes picks up a guitar and sings and has been known to empty a room in record time, I do know that, but the advantages and benefits of encouraging young people to engage with music. And what I'm assured is that we've talked about some of the diversionary activities and some of the development activities we need to provide for young people. And I think the report reflects this, that we want to ensure that this funding allows us to reach out to young people, particularly in disadvantaged communities that might not get these opportunities. So I'm grateful for the question, and I'm confident that that significant amount of money will allow us to make some real progress on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question for Councillor Thompson is from Councillor Lawton. Point 6, International Women's Day. Councillor Lawton.
Thank you, Chair. I sincerely hope that the International Women's Day of 8th of March was a roaring success. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend, but otherwise it had my full support. The fight against sexual harassment, bullying and exploitation has been given tremendous coverage lately as a result of the despicable behaviour of Harvey Weinstein and latterly the exposés regarding the Donald. I understand that the Labour Party places great importance on the support of these events, and rightly so. But it seems that supporting these events requires actions and not just fine words. The fact that Labour councillors, particularly their lady councillors, preach their good intentions over equality and then run away and hide behind their hypocrisy when their self-interest is threatened. Could Councillor Thompson please explain why Middlesbrough Labour Council penalises female victims and promotes the bullies in the workplace as per the promotion of Tony Parkinson?
So, no, yeah, we can't have that question. You know the rules. We don't allow questions that specifically attack individual officers of the council. Next question, again for Councillor Thompson, is from Councillor Halawi. place-based approach to resettlement and asylum. Councillor Halawi.
Thank you, Chair. I was pleased to note that in 2017 the Home Office sought to develop a more joined-up conversation with asylum and refugee matters with local authorities. And it's been decided that the Home Office will consult with a small number of local authorities to produce greater partnerships and understanding how local authorities work with the Home Office. And Middlesbrough has been approached to be part of a development pilot scheme to look at data sharing, complementary systems of providing accommodation and living standards. The fact that we've been chosen is of great support to us, and I think it recognises our deliberations already and the way we're always seeking to improve matters. Hopefully Middlesbrough's participation will have an impact nationally, because the pilot study will result in recommendations which will be put across the country nationally to help develop social regeneration across our towns, and this will also show how our council has built greater understanding and influence nationally with regard to this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
In response to that, I would like to commend the councillor for the excellent work she does in her community, along with others, to support people who are seeking asylum or are refugees. As the chair of the North East Migration Partnership, part of my role has been to coordinate activities across the North East with local authorities and with third sector organisations to manage the process of resettling people seeking asylum and refugees. And the frustration shared across the region by local authorities is that we've almost been excluded from that process. And we've made representations to the Home Office ministers that we've got a lot to offer, rather than just dealing with the consequences and the challenges that we have a positive role to play and ensure people are resettled. And I feel that because the process has been privatised in effect, that our opportunities to do that have been denied us. The Home Office have made a small step towards us in that, and the councillor is right to highlight that, and we're grateful for that response, because this is a town that welcomes refugees and asylum seekers. You are welcome here if you're a refugee, and we will do all that we can. And I'm pleased that the Home Office are going a little way to supporting some of the work that we do. It doesn't cover all of the support that we need to provide and that we're welcome to provide. And I'm really concerned, I'll finish on this point, it's a point that I make regularly at the North East Migration Partnership. There are some authorities around that are not prepared to play their part, and shame on them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question, again for Councillor Thompson, from Councillor Goodchild, Local History Month. Councillor Goodchild.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really thrilled about this history of Middlesbrough because I'm old. but to be honest with you, I think it's absolutely phenomenal. And I'm just wondering how you're going to get all the people to go to, to do the tours, go in the courts and do everything. Because if anyone misses anything in this book, they're mad. So will you please let me know how you get the leaflets out, how you explain to people what you're doing about it. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
I'm grateful to the Councillor Chair for raising the profile of History Week. It is very popular. Lots of the events that are on there are oversubscribed. I've missed out myself on a few of them. I would urge councillors and anybody else that's listening, get the message out there, because we've got a fascinating history. Very, very briefly, I was having a conversation with Amos Hinton's grandson the other day, and I had a wonderful half an hour on the phone with him. We've got a fascinating history as a town, and I think that History Week really, really does raise that profile. History Month, sorry, it's month, not a week, yes. So yeah, I would urge all councillors and others to promote that and to take part in that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Final question for Councillor Thompson is from Councillor John Hobson, Building Team Capacity Recruitment. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Councillor. Can I refer you to your report, item 4, page 3, please? regarding the two new senior posts that have been created in cultural services. I believe at this moment we already have 3 managers in cultural services, a business development manager, a cultural services manager, and a marketing and communications manager. If the council are so short of money, how can we possibly create new senior posts like these? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I think reference has already been made to the Town Hall, which is a fantastic venue, and I hope you take the opportunity to go and see that. It provides a cultural offer that goes beyond the boundaries of Middlesbrough and people travelling in, and I think that we can be very proud of what's provided there. I think the important thing is that the offer there matches the investment that we've put in there, and I think it's really important that we have a programme manager that puts forward a programme that goes beyond, as the Mayor has said, the traditional stuff that we've put in there, but using that extended space that we now have to hold a whole range of activities. So I think that post is really important. I've made reference to the importance of our history and raising our profile, the contribution that makes to tourism and income into the town is well demonstrated. So those 2 posts are absolutely vital to that, and I'm certainly happy that we've got them.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question is for Councillor Young. It's from Councillor Story, Pybus Building Update. Councillor Story.
Thanks, Chair. Just like to make a comment about the item about Pybus Buildings. For people who don't know Pybus Buildings, it's again a historical, nice historical building, very beautiful building on Roman Road in Linthorpe, and it's currently a Tesco Express. And Tesco demolished a section of beautiful stonework balustrade there. This was noticed by local Labour councillors in Linthorpe and Park Ward, was highlighted to the Member of Parliament's office where I work, and work was taken up immediately to speak to Tesco and find out what was going on. The work had been carried out without planning permission. It was in the conservation area, and swift action was taken by the council to convene a meeting with Tesco's, which I attended on behalf of the Member of Parliament and with council officers. And I'd just like to congratulate everyone for the swift response to this issue. This is a historic building, and members of the Pybus brothers family actually contacted Andy's office to say how happy they were to see that action was being taken. The work has been stopped. Tesco's are looking again at putting forward applications potentially to try and fix the issue. And I strongly made the case in the room on behalf of the local residents that the balustrade needs to be put back. It needs to be put back in its original standard with the same quality of finish, and that Tesco have responsibility to do that. So we'll watch that with interest. But I'd just like to praise the council and councillors in that area for the swift action in making sure that this historic building doesn't fall into disrepair, and that balustrade is replaced as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Young.
I'll thank Councillor Story for those comments, and I'll certainly pass them on to officers. Without repeating what Councillor Story said, we are continuing to meet with Tesco, and we have made our position clear, and that is that we expect that the heritage elements of the Pybus building to be put back to their original state.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question is for Councillor Harvey. It's from Councillor McGee, Dementia Friendly Bereavement Services. Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Chair. I was just very pleased to read in that report about how the Middlesbrough Council's bereavement service have received their badges and their certificates in terms of the bereavement services and the dementia training that they've received there. Encouraging Middlesbrough Council staff to support the public in this way is to be both applauded and encouraged. When people are suffering with grief following the loss of a loved one, they need all the support and the understanding that they can get. And awareness of the issue of people who have dementia is very important. I'd also like to say that Social Care and Adult Services Scrutiny Panel has been looking at issues around loneliness and social isolation and the negative impact that that can have on the people who live here. That's another area where the awareness of Middlesbrough Council staff will be very important, and they will have an important role to play in combating that loneliness and social isolation. So it's edifying to see that Middlesbrough Council staff not only respect the residents of the town that they serve, but that many of them go the extra mile to ensure that the services that are delivered with compassion and with care. And thank you to the staff for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome Councillor McGee's comments and the duly noted. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to questions for Councillor Walker. First question is Councillor Higgins on budget setting. Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chair. On paragraph 17 of Councillor Nicky Walker's report, it refers to other local authorities whose opposition parties have tabled alternative budgets. Because the alternative budget we got from the joint Conservative and Independent group was very disappointing, could you give any examples where this has happened elsewhere across the country?
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Walker, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be brief with my examples. I have quite a few, but so on national basis, Wrexham this year, there was an 8-page document which include references to risk, etc., submitted by, in that case, a Labour opposition. In the Wirral, last year, the Conservatives submitted an alternative budget, again in advance. Darlington and Stockton locally have both had submitted alternative budget proposals which have gone through the proper process of going through the Section 151 officer over recent years, Stockton just this year. And this is important for reasons highlighted in my report, so that it can be ascertained if those budget proposals are viable, if they're legal, if they are indeed part of the revenue budget and not part of the capital budget, in order that the appropriate impact assessment can be done, and also that the members of the council who are tasked with setting a balanced budget can actually see those proposals in advance, just as they can with the official budget that's put forward. So we have to legally set a balanced budget. It's therefore disingenuous to suggest that you can vote against the council tax increase without putting forward viable proposals. And I think that's what's being suggested by some members of this council, unfortunately. I hope next year they might take a different approach.
Right, thank you, Councillor. Right, we are just about on the 30 minutes, so we've got one more question and then that will be it. So the final question is for Councillor Walker, and it's from Councillor Denise Rooney, Council Tax Leaflet. Councillor Rooney.
It's on page 3 of Councillor Walker's report at points 21 and 22, and it's in reference to the leaflet that was issued with the council tax bills. I'd just like to commend the team who put this together. I think it looks excellent. It's visually interesting. I think it shows what the council is doing to provide services to residents in Middlesbrough and how the money is spent. And on the flip side, it shows how Middlesbrough is developing and investing in the area. And I think it's a great message to get out to the residents who live in our area. So if you can thank them, please.
Thank you, Councillor Rooney. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll certainly pass that on to the officers concerned. The aim was to provide something that was understandable. The material that we legally have to provide is not, I would suggest, not that understandable. It's a lot of tables of figures. And I think we've all had as councillors, members of the public saying to us, well, what do we get for our council tax? We just get our bin emptied. And it shows that's clearly not the case. And that's a national problem. Somebody on BBC Tees who was interviewing me said, well, they talk to people on the streets of Middlesbrough and we're getting that sort of response. But that is a national issue. If you talk to people throughout the country, that's what they say. And I think, but it's important as well as saying what our revenue budget spent on. A very large proportion, of course, is looking after children and the elderly. In fact, if you take the amount of the council tax we receive, it doesn't even cover that. Council tax covers about 23% of the council expenditure, not the majority as some people, probably maybe for us as a councillor, presumed. And I think it also mentions in there, of course, the important point that the investment programme is not directly funded by the council tax, but is funded through the capital programme. And we are very good in Middlesbrough at getting in grants for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Agenda item 8, report of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. I understand the Vice Chair is going to introduce this report, so Councillor Morstan.
Thank you, Chair. The Scrutiny Board and panels have covered virtually every aspect of council work, and they're continuing. During this period, there were 2 call-ins which were not referred back to executive. I can appreciate the anger and disappointment for the persons who did the call-in. I've referred any questions or comments on the report to Councillor Sharrock, who will supply replies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dryden.
I think it's probably appropriate that I inform members of the Council of the Health Scrutiny Panel in respect of the respite provision for residents of Middlesbrough, but also beyond its Teesside. You've seen some publicity, no doubt, regarding the proposals from the Clinical Commissioning Group to reconfigure the services which are currently provided for Bankfields Court and Aysgarth. That affects 90 individuals across Teesside. 34 of those people come from Middlesbrough. The Council has the ability, as the power, to refer items to the Secretary of State for Health if it considers them to be contentious or disagrees with them. That power rests with the Health Scrutiny Panel. That's why I think it's important I tell the Council what we've done on your behalf. We have, through the Tees Valley, first of all, Joint Scrutiny Committee, ensured that another scrutiny committee was established just to focus on this one point. That consisted of Middlesbrough, Stockton, Redcar and Hartlepool. Middlesbrough and Redcar have come to the decision that we are minded to make a referral to the Secretary of State of Health because we disagree with what their proposals are for the respite facilities for our residents. Stockton and Hartlepool have decided not to do that and take a watch and brief. Currently, we've joined up with Redcar and Cleveland on the South Tees to have discussions with the CCG as to how we progress. That's something we're obliged to do before we can make a referral. At that point, we haven't yet engaged the CCG, but our point is that the respite facilities for the most severe and profound must continue at them venues. It's a clinical provision, it has proper clinical oversight with proper nurses and doctors. The notion that you will expand choice is welcome for many people with learning disabilities. It is not appropriate for our residents who have severe and profound needs. And this isn't a populist issue, and I've made this point before. If these people had a protest march, they could do down Albert Road and you wouldn't stop the traffic. But this speaks to what type of society we want to be. And I think we will continue to press for the appropriate provision for the Middlesbrough residents and hopefully other residents for respite with proper clinical oversight.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions, comments on the report of the Overview and Scrutiny Board? Oh, Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. Culture and Community Scrutiny Panel. The difference that selective licensing has made in the Thornsby is absolutely brilliant. What I'd like to see is it come full-time right over Middlesbrough. I live on an estate with private renting just the same as everybody else. But that selective licensing has made such a difference. And I recommend that we do it as quickly as possible if we get the money. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Okay, no further questions, comments. Can we note the report? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 9, Pay Policy Statement. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. This is something that's required to be brought on an annual basis to Council. Much of it actually is the same as last year, so it might be helpful if I just briefly outlined where there have been any changes. One is in paragraph 9, where obviously the amounts of pay due the pay award will have increased, as it has for other staff, and also the only real change then is at paragraph 17, which follows a recommendation in relation to best practice from the auditors. It wasn't a requirement that we changed, but it was a recommendation regarding best practice, and that's where, paragraph 17, Chair, which has been added in.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I go to the floor with this one and to invite questions and comments, a number of councillors have indicated they wish to speak on this, so I'll go to them first, then I'll invite it open to the floor. So the first question is Councillor Hubbard. Councillor Hubbard?
Chair. Middlesbrough Council has many apprentices who are paid significantly less than the living wage. These apprentices are the council's lowest paid employees, and this should be reflected in the council's pay policy statement. The report states apprentices have been excluded as the salaries attributable to apprenticeships are in line with those set out in the national minimum wage legislation. This appears to be an attempt to hide the true picture. I would like to know if, in the spirit of openness and transparency, this report can be amended to include the pay of apprentices who truly are the lowest paid in Middlesbrough Council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, can I just amend what I said before? It was actually paragraph 16 I was referring to, sorry. In regard to Councillor Hubbard's question, I've got a lot of sympathy with what he says. I know he's raised this question before. It's actually been raised and discussed within the Labour group, the majority group as well. Although I don't think this is particularly a party political issue and I wouldn't want to make it one. What I can show Councillor Hubbard, I'm sure he'd be pleased to hear this, is that the Community Learning Service are in the process of developing an apprenticeship strategy. And linked to that are proposing to review apprenticeship terms and conditions and rates of pay to bring them more in line with other employees. Obviously bearing in mind that their contract includes an element of time involved off-the-job training, which is required as part of the National Apprenticeships Framework. It's expected that will be completed within 6 months, Councillor Hubbard. It will go to executive, but I'll be only too happy to flag it up with you when that piece of work has come to an end. There's recommendations there. But I do have sympathy in what you said.
Okay, next person I've been advised wishes to ask a question on this report is Councillor Saunders. Councillor Saunders?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Page 2, paragraph 9 there, Councillor Walker. Could you please explain why the monitoring officer's salary has increased from £52,504 to £66,468, which is an increase of £14,000, an increase of 26%, when the Department of Heads has suffered significant job losses and has a target to reduce costs of 50%.
Okay, I think we've got a clear answer on this one. We can't answer this question in particular because it does relate to an individual officer of the council. We only have one monitoring officer, so it's not a generic question about a position that's held by a number of people. So I'm sorry, can't allow an answer to that question. Next question is from Councillor Mohan, sorry about that. Councillor Mohan.
Thanks, Chair. This refers to page 4, top paragraph states, the Council retains the discretion under the local government, early termination of employment, discretionary compensation, England and Wales regulations 2006, to offer discretionary payments. Can you please explain exactly what this means, in particular which group of officers could benefit from this? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker?
The pay policy statement and that would refer to all officers, Chair. I don't see that it's the pay policy statement applies to all officers.
Okay, thank you. Final question before we go to the floor is Councillor Rathmell. Councillor Rathmell.
Yes, thank you for that, Chair. The actual legislation, I believe Councillor Munn was referring to, allows for discretionary payments of up to 2 years' salary for senior officers. And the Mika Group personally feel that an exit payment of up to 2 years can be potentially paid to a senior officer when we've had such high turnover on chief executive officers in particular, is abhorrent, and that the pay policy statement suggests in it that the decision on the exit payments of the most highly paid officers should be by a committee, and there's the potential for that to be behind closed doors. I think the residents of Middlesbrough have suffered enough financial hardship without allowing chief officers potentially massive payouts from a Labour-dominated committee and one that's potentially held in secret. So the Meeker Group would like to move that this is changed so that all payoffs as such are brought to full council.
That's a proposal to amend it rather than a question.
Can we take that amendment? Right, okay. Right, so if yes, it looks like you've moved an amendment there to the actual policy as it's written. Would you like to sort of specify what your amendment is? Then if we've got a seconder, we'll go to a vote on the issue.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like the pay policy statement to reflect that senior officers' final settlements with the discretionary 2 years' pay also included come to full council rather than be by a Labour-dominated committee, potentially behind closed doors.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Okay. All those in favour, please show. All those against? $27. Okay, that motion falls. Right, are there any other questions, comments on the pay policy statement? Okay, can we agree the pay policy statement? Thank you. Agenda item 10, Strategic Plan 2018-2022. Mayor Budd.
Thank you, Chair. This strategic plan is the Council's overarching business plan for the medium term. It fits in with the budget, the medium term financial plan and the investment plan. We've done it slightly differently this year, as I hope you'll appreciate. The strategic plan used to be about 3 inches thick and was somewhat difficult to understand and read. We agreed when we looked at consulting on this in December that we would try to do it in a slightly different way this year. So the strategic aims are the same around business imperatives and physical regeneration and social regeneration. But we also said that it was set clearly out the Mayor's vision. It would celebrate success and sell the Council's plans for the future. It'd be more useful in communicating the above to staff and partners, residents and businesses, and it would inform a more streamlined approach to strategic management. So that's the rationale behind this. The consultation process is mentioned in the report. The thing that is quite different with this, I think it's the first time I've ever been able to say this, that the text has been edited by the Plain English campaign. It's a dangerous precedent, this, I think, for council documents, and has been awarded a Crystal Mark accreditation. I think if you look at it, it's visual, it's relatively simple to understand, it gets points over without being overly complicated. And I think towards the end, it also gives us some targets and some ways of measuring success. So I hope we can all agree to this. The format's visual and easy to understand, as I've said. It sets out the business imperatives, the physical regeneration, the social regeneration, and indicates those measures of success. So I hope it's a bit more readable than normal, not just for us, but for anybody else who's interested in it. And perhaps this shows a way forward with a number of council documents in the future. So I recommend that it's approved by the council. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Budd. Any questions, comments on this report? Councillor Morstan.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate the comment about the easy reading and everything. The thing is a large print version.
A good point, and I think we should make that available.
Any further questions, comments on this report? Can we agree the recommendations? Thank you. Agenda item 11, mortgage interest rate. Councillor Walker.
Failed to find anything interesting to say about this report. It is something that we've got a legal requirement to bring to council, but I'll just move the recommendations.
Any questions, comments on this report? Can we agree the recommendations? Thank you. Agenda item 12, urgent items. There are none for this meeting. Agenda item 13, members' question time. We have one question. It's for Councillor Walker and from Councillor Lawton. Do you want to read your question out, Councillor, or do you want to take it as read?
I'll read the question out, thank you, Chair.
Okay.
At the recent call-in for Centre Square, Councillor Walker responded to a question on the financial and non-financial risk of this project by replying that there was risk in doing something and risk in doing nothing. Could Councillor Walker please explain then the risk assessment procedures that she considered before deciding on the preferred risk of continuing with the Centre Square project, and what the cost-benefit analysis implications and conclusions that dictated her preferred choice?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to point out that although I appreciate being elevated to the rank of importance of deciding all this on my own, it was actually an executive decision. But I take Councillor Lawton's point. I think he's wanting to know what persuaded me on my thought processes. If Councillor Lawton actually, and I don't dispute saying that, and I absolutely stand by what I said, the risks of doing it and risks of not doing it, with that level of expenditure of public money, of course, we've got to look at the risk. The relevant risks and consequences delivery are outlined in paragraphs 83 to 96, options appraisal and risk assessments of the Part A of the February 2018 report, Chair. I've got it here. It's quite lengthy, and I'm sure you don't want me to read it all out, but it is there if Council wants to look. And that, I'm just saying that is one element that I've looked at. This section explored the relative merits of various funding options, including likely financial and socio-economic implications of the do-nothing option. Similarly, the confidential element of the report, which obviously I can't go into, Chair, for legal reasons which you'll be aware of, further outlined the relative merits of a lease model versus a purchase model. This contained analysis from BNP Paribas, which, as you'll know, members will know, are an internationally renowned company, which includes, with regard to new council accommodation, there is an option for the council to purchase a completed building. However, utilising third-party finance through an overriding lease structure could be a cost-effective solution that would transfer the construction risk to a private sector partner while the council retains the occupational risk. I think our risk has, and Councillor Rooney's already referred to, our risk has actually diminished slightly as things change, as we negotiate a higher rent for our part, for the part that we're going to rent out. That then lowers the occupancy level that we need in order to reach a break-even or a profit position. I think what I was referring to when I used those words, Councillor Lawton, was in terms of risk. Yes, there are financial risks, which I already referred to, but there's also economic risks to Middlesbrough. So there's a risk, if we don't do it, of companies who want to come to Middlesbrough. Actually, they want to come to the Tees Valley, but Middlesbrough is really, as a business heart, as a city centre of the Tees Valley, is the only viable place that they will come to. And our city centre is the only place in Middlesbrough that they wish to come to. So the risk of those, it's a risk of those companies going elsewhere. It's a risk of the jobs that's associated with those companies going elsewhere not being realised. It's then the risk to our retail sector. Members will remember the Centres for Cities report that identified the risk to our retail sector of not having businesses to support the retail sector by their spend. So there's that risk as well. Then we turn to our own accommodation for our staff. We could look at other alternatives such as a do-nothing option and keeping our current civic centre. What has been outlined in reports is that is likely to cost us more. It's been likened to having a Category D fridge, and that is something that obviously the ordinary member of the public would probably not wish to continue to invest in. So the risk then is, if we don't follow the course of action which has been agreed, that we don't have that we continue to have a building that's not fit for purpose, that costs us far more per year in energy costs, that doesn't support our agile working or deliver the savings for our agile working. So those, I believe, are the key risks that I was referring to, and I think I did expand a little bit on the words that Councillor Lawton has quoted. If you'd like to read the reports, if he hasn't already, there is a lot more in the reports than obviously I've got time to read out tonight.
I'd like a supplementary, please.
Okay, Councillor, yeah.
Firstly, thank you, Councillor Walker, and I would appreciate that copy. But you're talking there about these problems with filling up a second multi-storey office building, assuming that the council fill up one. If we end up with a situation where the landlords find that in the short term they can't fill the building and they're responsible for an awful lot of business rate, won't they then take the risk of closing the building down and we end up with another Gurney house, except instead of in the periphery, more right in the centre of our town? Instead.
Councillor Walker?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the Gurney house analogy. I'd say Gurney house is not Grade A office accommodation. Grade A in the terms of the energy use, etc., etc. It's not fit for the modern working practices, and it's certainly not a place where firms would relocate to from outside of the area to here. The risk is partly with us, as I've outlined, and partly with the developer. Councillor Rooney's also covered it, and I think I covered it, is that there is a break-even position, which is contained in Part B of the report, which obviously I can't go into. And the level of rent assumed for that is substantially less than what we, in Part B of the report, without giving the figures, is substantially less than what we are now negotiating on. That's the income to us, Councillor, not what we're paying. So the break-even position is now a substantially a lower percentage occupancy than it was before. There is confidence around filling those buildings, and we have as assurance from that the BNP Paribas report, which I've already referred to, which is based on the proposal that was put to us by Ashholes. It's as opposed to some earlier reports which were on a more theoretical proposal. So yes, there is risk of doing it, and yes, there is risk of not doing it.
Thank you, Councillor. Agenda item 14, notice of motion. I invite Mayor Budd to move the motion. Do you want to read it out, Mayor Budd, or can we take it as read? Okay, do we have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. Point of information, at the Constitution meeting, 22nd of February 2017, and the full council meeting, dated the 31st of May 2017, it was agreed that all motions would be read out in full. I'm sorry about that, Mr. Mayor. But that was agreed.
Okay, fine.
I shall read it out in full then. This council values and supports the hard work of staff of Cleveland Police. Since 2010, we've seen the cruel reality of austerity in our police service. Cleveland has lost 500 police officers as a result of Conservative government policies. The government continues to insufficiently fund our police force, and as a result, precept rises have been necessary to prevent further cuts and protect public safety. This council calls upon the government to properly fund our police force and stop putting the burden on local taxpayers. The real threat to policing and public safety on Teesside is Tory cuts and the effect those have. This council notes the recent Police Federation report showing morale is low amongst officers due to recent attacks on Cleveland Police. We call upon politicians of all parties to properly support the police by demanding fairer funding from government and not further damage morale. This council recognises the progress which Cleveland Police has made in recent years, including being recognised as good in efficiency and effectiveness by independent inspectors at HMIC. This council will write to the Police and Crime Commissioner and ask him to pass on our thanks and support to officers and staff for all the hard work that they do to protect our communities and keep us safe. This letter will be copied to local members of Parliament. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Budd. It has been moved. It has been seconded by Councillor Rooney. So I now invite you to speak to the motion, Mayor Budd.
Thank you. At the risk of repeating what I've just said, I think we've talked on many occasions about the effects of austerity on local government. We've also talked about the effects from time to time on our NHS, which the current government is now at long last beginning to recognise exists. And this motion concerns another vital service, our police. In 2018-19, it is estimated that the number of police officers will be 1,236 in Cleveland. That's down 490 through austerity. There will be 147 or full-time equivalents of PCSOs, which is a further 50 down. And austerity, as we know in many ways, has been accompanied by a blame culture. You know, who's to blame for this? The government? Well, not according to local Tory politicians who've created diversionary tactics, which are so obvious but still get repeated. One local Tory politician has requested further resources from our PCC and the Chief Constable, when he should be directing that request to his own government. He should be being honest with his constituents. Another Tory politician is constantly attempting a review of a service he has no responsibility for and quoting historical events to justify this. We've seen just this week another report from HMIC on the Cleveland Police, which again rates it as good, especially for neighbourhood policing. And now even the Police Federation, not a left-wing trade union, I would add, even the Police Federation have publicly complained about these attacks and the effect that they're having on morale. So I hope that we, at least here, can all agree to thank and back our police force through the PCC and write to our MPs as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Budd. Does anybody wish to speak on this motion? Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. I actually asked my residents what they thought about the police, and I've just brought a couple of responses. I phoned the police because I could not get into my road. It was blocked by cars on both sides. I was told somebody would attend. I'm still waiting for them to turn up. The officers on the beat can be good, but how can they claim to be efficient and effective if they protect officers who break the law? Any business is only as good as the person that runs it. The Police and Crime Commissioner is a joke. Personally, when asking for help from the police, I've been told to go and sort it out myself on more than one occasion. If you telephone 101, you get an answer machine with Ian Spittle's voice. He left the police service before Christmas. This shows how effective and efficient they really are. I rest my case.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Marston.
Thank you, Chair. I can agree with Councillor Hobson's comment on lack of response. That is one of the main complaints we do get from residents. Equally, we get comments praising the police for the response and actions. So there needs to be more work done on response times and response in all. As a former police officer myself, we were always proud of the fact that it was a non-political body. The police are now political football, and this is shameful. We must support the police, we give them every support, but give it as a total body of people, not as one side to the other and kicking the police about. I hope we've seen the end of the costly inquiries and costly redundancy payments and costly rewards for abuse of officers and other acts. I will support this motion, but I would like to see more done from the police side itself, or the chief officers of the police. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
I have to say I'm really disappointed at the petty nature of some of the comments that we've just heard. People will be aware that my community, and as has been explained by my colleagues from my ward, are relying on the police at the moment in a very, very difficult time. People are feeling very frightened and very threatened, and rightly so, because what we've got going on there is criminal behaviour, not antisocial behaviour. And I think that we have a group of young people out there who are cocking a snook, if I can use that phrase, at the local police force, who think that's clever. And I'm really concerned that sometimes on social media we'll get people attacking the police, making up stories quite often to try and ridicule Cleveland Police and the work that they do. Well, I'm saying on behalf of my community, because my community at the moment are not talking about not being able to get out of the end of their street. They're talking about the confidence to go out about their normal business. And the only way they can do that is at the protection of Cleveland Police. And I commend the officers. And I was in correspondence with the Chief Constable last week. I don't think I've spoken to a Chief Constable before. I was quite impressed with the fact that he emailed me and he emailed my colleagues and he told us that he was going out there on patrol, and he did do that. So it's very easy to kick organisations, isn't it? But never forget there's consequences for that, because there are consequences for austerity. Austerity was a political choice, but there are consequences for that, and we're facing the consequences. And while you sit on the sidelines and snipe at people who take great risks, their own lives, to protect ours, the people who run towards danger to protect us while we're running away, shame on you, absolutely shame on you. So I want those police officers out there patrolling the streets now, a great risk to themselves, on our behalf. I support what they do, and I know my colleagues on the Labour group, and I would hope other people as well, support what they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shamal Biswas.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will wholeheartedly support the motion. Now, I think a couple of points is been made. I think Councillors Michael already said it, so I'm not going to go into that. I was going to say something about this. Now, it's been mentioned that what do our police do? Can I say something to you? I live in a country where I can peacefully sleep at night because I know that my police force are doing their utmost and their best because they love their job. They go out of the way to do things what ordinary people will not do, and also make us safe, as though that this is the only police force in the world where the police force do not carry everyday gun. You know why? Because they believe in themselves and they believe in the residents and the people they are protecting. So when criticizing a policeman saying that, sorry, my cat is up in the loft and I can't get that down, it's a shame on you to say that they cannot come. And as you said already, Councillor, cuts, police force, police federation, they have a job to do, and yet we are lucky that they haven't come out on the street and saying enough is enough, because with the funding what we do have, there is not possible at all to make everyone safe and sleep in their peace. And I can tell you another things. You know, in politics, right, when you don't agree with someone, you have every right to disagree. I love that when people saying something and other people disagree. But to disagree something, one thing you must have, and that is why you disagree. You must have a substance and a ground to disagree. I'm afraid to say my opposite section, oh, they would love to disagree in everything, willy-nilly, I must say. But yet, they don't say why they're disagreeing for. On the motion, that's exactly, they're disagreeing, but yet they're saying this is needed. This motion is there, so this council, Middlesbrough as a whole, we are saying enough is enough, austerity had enough of it, and we need to protect our police force. I feel shame of we have to charge that extra bit for your council tax. People complain about that. Sorry, my council tax has gone up. Well, no one loves to put the council tax up, but yet we have to do it because we know that police force are doing something and they are not properly funded. And as for the police force is become political, well, it wasn't. Who brought it in? This government thrown at us saying that each and every authority must have a police PCC, right? If we don't want to make it, well, independent people has the right to stand as a PCC. Every other political party has the right. That's democracy. And talking of democracy, when we come to the motion, we have to have vote on it. Because if I disagree, I will vote against it. But I tell you something in this chamber always happens. Sorry, I love that motion, and yet, sorry, I'm not going to vote with it because I don't know why I don't disagree with it. And so what do? I agree with it, but I'll abstain. What does that mean? Abstain. I agree, and yet I abstain. I'm sorry, shame on you as well. Don't abstain. You either have the guts to say, I don't disagree, and this is the reason I don't disagree. I don't agree. And if you disagree, you do that and vote against it. But if you agree, please vote for it, but do not abstain. That's all I have to say. And I will be supporting the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lawton.
Thank you, Chair. I've been listening to some of the comments made about residents in various wards and their response to the question, do you have any issues with the police? A resident of mine complained that there was an incident where a hit and run was not investigated for a week and a half. Indeed.
So, Councillor,
no, this is the police.
Sorry, Councillor,
this is
legal
the police,
advice.
and it's not, I'm not naming anybody.
We cannot have this comments made. I'm sorry, Councillor.
I'm passing this on in the same spirit that Councillor Hobson, Councillor Thompson, and Councillor Biswas have made. But in addition, I would like to say...
Councillor, no.
In addition, I would like to say that the problem with this letter is that it's politicized. It's been politicized. The PCC has politicized the police, and this council wants to send a letter to add a few more feathers to the cap of our current PCC. It's not a genuine letter. It's just another piece of political propaganda.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hubbard.
Yeah. I'll tell you why it's quite difficult with this motion to support one way or the other. It's because you've got a two-way split. You've got the police force, which undoubtedly are the best in the world. There's no doubt about that. But also you've got political direction. The police are only good is the direction that they're taken in. What's happened over the past 6-8 months maybe, we've had taxis and buses smashed on a regular basis, Park End, Palace to Park, all over the place. We've got the youths, because nothing's happened, the youths have grown in confidence, and I totally agree with Councillor Thompson on that remark. And then what happens is this. That's the net result. That's what happens when they're not checked. And that's because of political direction. The police are the best in the world, there's no doubt about that. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Okay. Right. Next person who wishes to speak is Councillor Story. Councillor Story.
I think it's difficult actually to follow Councillor Thompson, because I think that was one of the best speeches I've ever heard in this chamber, undoubtedly. And I've heard a lot of speeches from the back of the room and from standing here. I've heard people talk about politicising this just now, and Councillor Hubbard mentioned politicising this. Well, you better believe we're going to politicise it. You better believe we're going to talk about the politics of this, because this isn't just about operational policing This isn't just about what happens on the ground. This is about an agenda. This is about an agenda of a government that has chosen to make a choice in terms of public spending in this country. And the Mayor referred to the NHS, and he could refer to any number of departments. He could refer to local government, health, he can refer to DWP, he can refer to any number of different aspects of the public realm which are being cut to the bone. And the social fabric of this country is being frayed at the edges, not just by some process of osmosis. These things don't happen in a vacuum. They happen because people take decisions nationally to make choices in terms of public spending and where money should be spent. So when you talk about, and Councillor Mostyn makes the right point, you know, he talks about how we want to see quick response, we want to see a good response from the police, and I think we do actually. But I also think that you're much more likely to get a quick response if your budget's not been cut by 36% since this government got in 2010. And there are consequences, and Councillor Thompson mentions consequences. It's very easy to stand up here and do anecdotes. It's easy to tell an anecdote about what you've heard or what you've seen, and that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But there is a reason why people are concerned about policing, and the reason they're concerned, whether people in this room like it or not, whether they want to hear it or not, the reason there is concern about policing, and the reason why this motion is written as it is, and the reason why it's critical of the government, is because of austerity and because of cuts. And when the Member of Parliament, in the next door constituency, when the Member of Parliament says that the government is funding policing appropriately, and then in the same breath says that he accepts the PCC has to increase the precept, he can't have it both ways. You cannot say in the same breath that policing is funded adequately and also say that it requires extra funding. You have to decide what side of the fence you're on, and it's one of the rare times where he doesn't just blatantly shill for the government, and I think he should say what he thinks. Does he genuinely believe that the government is funding policing appropriately or not? And I think it's wrong that he doesn't come out and say that. There are people in this room, whether it's Conservatives or people who associate with Conservatives, there are people in this room who have an opportunity. You have the ear of your government. We had the ear of our government when we were in power. You have the opportunity to write letters. You have the opportunity to lobby elected officials at the highest level of government and say, you want this to stop. You can say, we do not believe that policing is funded appropriately. We're losing 500 officers. We're losing 50 PCSOs. These things are real and they have an effect. And when the social fabric frays like it does, it's the people at the bottom of society, it's the people in the deprived communities in this town, it's people who can afford it the least who get punished the most. It isn't people who can afford it, and that is a massive problem. We have to accept that inequality comes into this, and cuts to police are as unequal as cuts to health, as cuts to DWP. I'll be backing this motion, and I won't be backing it half-heartedly, as if to say, oh, well, I understand it's political, but we just have to be political. It's an unfortunate cost of doing business. It's not. Politics matters. Your politics, whether you're Conservative, Independent or Labour, in this room, matters. And your ability to articulate arguments for or against a particular course of action by a particular government at a particular time matters. And you should do those things. You should say what you want to say, and you should stand up for the communities that are affected by austerity in the most brutal and offensive way in our town. And I will be doing that, and the way I'll be doing that is by supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rooney, Councillor Charlie Rooney.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be supporting the motion. I do hope that's no surprise. I'm a member of the Police and Crime Panel, as are colleagues across the political divide in this council. They know that austerity is causing these problems. This motion addresses the very problems you're complaining about call waiting times and access to them. If the best you've got is that they haven't changed the message on the phone, well, you called an elected official a joke. Well, I tell you what's a joke. A joke is promoting Parmos at national level and trying to buy an airport that isn't for sale. That's a political joke. The PCC isn't a political joke. He keeps telling us over and over again. He's been to over 500 public meetings. He supports things like a domestic violence resource. He supports refuges for women. He supports activities in cybercrime and child sexual exploitation. There's an awful lot going on out there, and they haven't got the resource to deal with it all properly. Now, I haven't got the figures off the top of my head, but calls to 101 have increased dramatically over the last few weeks and months. Now, that's the problem. That's the problem. The resource is the problem. This motion clearly addresses that resource, Chair, and I do think we've heard enough about it. I'd like, if I can, on a point of order, to move that the motion be put.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Rostron. Right, it's been moved and seconded that we go straight to the vote. So we'll have the first vote is to agree to go to the vote, then we'll have the vote. So all those in favour of going straight to the vote, please show. That's 30. All those against? Okay, right. We now go to the vote in support of the motion. All those in favour, please show. (32). All those against? Okay, that motion is carried. Agenda item 15, notice of urgent motion. There isn't one for this meeting.
A lot of disturbance over that side, and you seem to be deaf again.
Agenda item 16, Council Diary. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Members have in front of them the anticipated Council Diary for the forthcoming municipal year. I don't think there's anything else to say on it. I will just commend it to members, Chair.
Okay, any questions or comments on the proposed Council Diary for next year? Can we agree it? Thank you. Agenda item 17, review of overview and scrutiny procedure rules. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. As noted in the report, members will see that the OSB procedure rules, particularly related to call-ins, have not been updated since 2002, and it was considered an appropriate time to do that now, given that there's an ongoing council review of scrutiny in OSB, and government recommendations have recently been received in relation to their overall view of scrutiny. The attached procedure was considered by the Constitution and Members Development Committee on the 19th of January 2018 and was subsequently considered by Overview and Scrutiny Board on the 20th of February, and it's now presented for Council approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roberts. Any questions or comments on this report? Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. We did have an ordinary call-in procedure before with a form that you could fill in, which was quite a good form. I really don't think this form is helping in any way. I think it's another way of trying to gag the opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. No further questions or comments. Can we agree the report, the recommendations? Can we agree? Thank you. Agenda item 18, charter recognitions. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Again, given the time, I will just I'll just move the report, Chair, because I believe members have had time to read it.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Walker. Before I invite questions or comments from the floor, I have been notified of two councillors who wish to speak on this report. First one, Councillor Hubbard.
Thanks, Chair. It's page 3, paragraph 10. The paragraph 0 hours contract states the Council would prefer not to mandate no 0 hours contracts. Why is this proposal worded in such a way as to allow agencies the use of 0 hour contracts? The Labour Party manifesto held a pledge to outlaw all 0 hours contracts. In April 2017, this move was welcomed by union leaders. Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell said the policies would form the cornerstone of the next Labour government and bring an end to the rigged economy that many experience in the workplace across Britain. Len McCluskey, General Secretary of Unite, said, "This positive platform from Labour is the antidote to the uncertainty and insecurity which plagues working life for millions in the UK." While Unison's General Secretary, Dave Prentice, said, "Calling time on zero-hour contracts would come as a huge relief to the many people who have no option but to work in this precarious and wholly unsatisfactory way." So the Meeker Group say that much stronger wording is required in this report and suggest the following is used. Middlesbrough Council do not tolerate the use of zero-hour contracts. Contractors are expected to offer a set amount of hours, and Middlesbrough Council will not issue contracts to any company that issues zero-hour contracts to its employees. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I think that's a suggestion for amendment, but I'm quite happy to sort of give an explanation if that would help the councillor. As it's sort of stated in the report that the council already has contract for this provision. I will state categorically I am not a fan of zero-hour contracts. I'm certainly particularly not a fan of compulsory zero-hour contracts. What I understand this to relate to, and where it says where it is requested by one of the employees, is the choice of the employee to opt for a zero-hour contract rather than have a zero-hour contract imposed on them. And that's what that relates to. So I'll say again, I'm not a fan of zero-hour contracts. And
There's an amendment, that's what I was saying. So
okay, right.
I'd like a vote on it.
That's fine. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour of that amendment to the report, please show. That's 12. All those against? (27). That amendment fails. Second question stroke comment on this report is from Councillor Rathmell. Councillor Rathmell.
In the report at page 4, paragraph 17, it refers to the Residential Care Charter and it relates to the commissioning of residential care provision. In what way does the current Residential Care Charter fail to meet the requirements of the Charter? And do we know when this will be rectified and how much this will cost to rectify?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker.
Chair, as it's not with the papers, I'll be happy to provide a written response on that. It was with the executive papers, Chair, and I presumed it would be with the council papers. But there are some elements that don't meet the charter, and I'll be happy to provide a written response to the member on that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Could you ensure that they get circulated to all members, Councillor? Thank you.
Chair, supplementary. Can we move then that this is put back till the next meeting until the information is available to all members? We don't want to do a centre square and make a decision blind. It would be good to have all the figures and information.
To that,
yeah.
It says our current contractual arrangements do not meet the requirements. We have contractual arrangements which we cannot choose to not adhere to. It's a bit like the alternative budget. We can't decide to just breach a contract. What we are saying is when we come to renew the contract, we will look to build the principles of the Charter into our new contractual arrangements. Whatever those are that they're not adhering to currently, we will seek to address those.
Yeah. Okay. Are you okay with that answer now, Councillor?
No, Chair, because it actually doesn't say that. It says our current contractual arrangements do not meet the requirements, but we will aim to build the principles of the Charter into our new contractual arrangements. It still isn't providing the information as to how much. It's not providing the information as to how much that's going to cost.
So as I understand it, Councillor, that's exactly what Councillor Walker's just said to you. If you insist on going for the deferral, are you moving deferral? Okay, do we have a seconder? All those in favour of deferral, please show. 10. All those against the deferral? 27. Okay, 27. Okay then, can we agree the recommendations in the report? All those in favour? Yep. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Agenda item 19, Grenfell Tower task and finish update. Councillor Young. Councillor Lewis Young, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. This is the final report of the Task and Finish Group, which was established last June. It will set out the work that was undertaken by Middlesbrough Council and its partners, and they can be seen in paragraph 6 to 10. The important thing to take away from the report is that no building gave any cause for concern. I think I want to thank our officers and those within our partner agencies who've been working very hard to ensure that our residents, and indeed those who work in high-rise buildings, are safe. That work has been thorough and has gone beyond the requirements set by the government. One of the points I raised at the extraordinary meeting in June was that the powers around building regulations, our powers, council's powers, are limited, in fact severely so. This continues to be the case as paragraph 5 of the report sets out. So while we wrote to owners of private high-rises, only some of them responded, and we cannot compel them to respond with that information. My firm held belief continues to be that local authorities should be solely responsible for building regulations, and that these regulations need to be given more teeth. So while this report is the final one to be brought to the Council, it's not the end of the issue, and myself and the Mayor will be writing to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government to add Middlesbrough Council's name to the call for building regulations to be handed back to the councils and to be given more powers to do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions, comments on this report? Okay, can we note the report? Thank you. Agenda item 20, outcome of the Standards Hearing Subcommittee held on the 16th of February 2018. Councillor Rostron.
One point of order, please. The report that we're relying upon today and that we're being asked to consider at agenda item 20 was made confidential and an exclusion under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 was applied. The only difference in this report is that the complainants' names have been removed. If we are to consider this report, then I think it's only fair that the complainants are included and that you have all parties' consent in order to review the report and consider it. In the absence of that, we don't want to breach, as a group, data protection, confidentiality, or the statute which you chose to reply, just because the monitoring officer perhaps has got a vendetta he wishes to exercise.
Scotty, Councillor, that's it. You can't help yourself, can you? You know you're not to use language like that in the chamber. Okay, I will now invite Councillor Rostron to address the report. Councillor Rostron.
Chair, was that something I said, by the way, that drove everybody out? I didn't think I did say anything. Anyway, this report is about the outcome of the standards.
Excuse me, Councillor. Can you please, I can't see who's got something on there with a very bright light. Can you switch your bright light off, please? It's very off-putting start up here.
I can't see.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, the light's off. Okay, thank you. Councillor Rostron.
Okay, this report is about the outcome of the Standards Hearing Subcommittee, which was held on the 16th of February 2018. The Standards Hearing Subcommittee decided that Councillor Lawton had failed to comply with the members' code of conduct, and the panel decided that a formal censure motion should be put to the council. So in accordance with the Standards Hearing Subcommittee's decision on the outcome of the hearing, I would like to formally propose a motion of censure against Councillor Terry Lawton.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder for this motion? Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Lawton, I'll now invite you to reply to the motion of censure. However, I will remind you that you can only speak with reasons why you should not be censured.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes. Yeah, I must say this is not a rerun of the standards hearing.
No.
So all you can speak is to the reasons why you should not be censured. Okay?
Chair, I was never given the opportunity to put my case before the Standards Committee.
Oh,
and in order for this motion to be held properly, I think that at least my version should be heard.
No, that is as my understanding of it, Councillor, I wasn't party to the standards hearing, but my understanding is you were invited to certainly be involved with the investigation and also be invited to attend the meeting to put your arguments forward then. My understanding is that you chose not to on both occasions. So I'm afraid the only I am being led to believe, and I have no reason to doubt that.
Telling lies.
I don't. Well, that's your opinion, Councillor.
No, that's the truth.
Councillor, I'm not getting into a debate or an argument with your good self on this one. I'm telling you where it stands for tonight's meeting. You can reply to the motion of censure. You can speak for the reasons why you should not be censured, and it is not a rerun of the standards hearing. So you cannot come here now and try to put forward arguments that should have been put forward during the investigation and the actual hearing. And that's it. If you try to deviate from that, Councillor, I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off. Choice is yours.
I'm not aware that I'll be deviating from that, Chair. I thought that was just purely a little bit of banter we had going there. But the recent standards hearing, which held allegations of my misconduct and was held behind closed doors, and basically, these were false allegations. And I'll tell you why they were false allegations, going down into the detail. In July of last year, sanctions prevented abuse by ensuring all my emails went through the one-stop system. And if they contained any harassment or bullying content, then those emails would not be passed on. I was not allowed social media access through my council IT equipment, although I've never used that equipment in a social media capacity. I have never made contact on Facebook, the only social media tool that I use, with any of the complainants, and I'm not Facebook friends with any of them. I have never sent them any Facebook posts or contacts, so the only way that the complainants could know anything about my Facebook posts is if they actually search Facebook for them. How then can I be accused of bullying if the complainants themselves seek out my Facebook post because they are not included in the circulation list? I don't quite see how I can be bullying when people are trying to find out information from my Facebook pages. So how can I bully anybody without any verbal, physical contact, without any dialogue, internet transactions, or anything of that nature? And just to support this notion that I could harass somebody through emails, I want to quote an excerpt from the standards hearing of July 2017. Councillor Lawton would retain his council IT equipment, but email access would be limited to the one-stop to prevent abuse. Whether through one-stop or otherwise, email communications from Councillor Lawton would sought to deal with matters that had already received a response would be filed without action, and emails raising wholly new issues would be forwarded to officers for action. And yet one of the points raised against me was that I kept sending the same emails and questioning the decisions of officers. But that's impossible if the sanctions that were in place against me, because they would prevent that. So all I can say is it's mischief making. By the way, Chair, may I ask one question? The complainants in July, I'm allowed to use that. I can name them, but I'm not allowed to name the complainants from February. Could you just confirm what names I can't use?
Yeah, didn't see that one coming, Councillor.
Right, okay. It was a little toe in the water, Chair. But the three complainants in February, I can't make any reference to them or their identities. However, the three complainants in July...
Hang on, Councillor. This censure is relevant to the February meeting. February meeting.
Yes.
I'm puzzled why the connections to
I'll get to the connection if you just allow me to continue. The three complainants, Mayor Budd, Mr Parkinson and Mr Roberts, in July, obviously I can't make any reference to any names from February, but they made sure that those sanctions were put in place for me. Now, if they are unable to enforce those sanctions properly, then there's a problem with them. I have not bullied or intimidated or harassed anybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brunton. Sorry, Councillor Brunton Dobson. Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Okay, right. It has been moved, it has been seconded. We will now go straight to the vote. All those in favour, please show. (27), all those against? 1. Right, Councillor, your censure is upheld. That being the conclusion of all business, I'd like to bring this meeting to a close. Thank you all for your attendance and wish you all a safe journey home. Good night.